feel like everybody's right and everybody's wrong.
100%. Why is this important? Why are we even going here? He's helped a lot of guys. He's also not had success with a lot of guys.
Come in with a purpose, and they're very intentional with what they do and how they do it.
From the majors to the sandlot, baseball and softball share space in one place. Welcome to the farm system.
Fellas, and the ladies, welcome back to another episode of The Farm. We got a special guest for us today. Listen, great resource, and now is on board as well. Also, too, I'm gonna let with this, right? I'm gonna give you Steve Candelaria, right? Did I say it right?
No, not at all.
Okay, well then intro yourself. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, go ahead. How do you say your last name?
Candelaria.
Candelaria. That's why I call you Candy. See,
Yeah.
it's just way easier.
That's why everybody calls me Candy.
Yeah, see, Candelaria.
Candle area.
Candle area.
That's it.
Candelaria.
Just 10 letters.
Candelaria, my guy. Okay, listen. Listen. Well, you know, we're all learning here, especially me. So we had so much time of like just building. What was it, like 3 years ago, 4 years ago?
It was right when COVID happened, so I think 2020 maybe.
2020.
About 3.5, 4 years.
Yeah, during that time too. When was the first time that we actually? I know that Ken connected us, the D-backs, but when did we originally? Did I go to the stadium first when I first met you?
Yeah. You came over. We was working with the player over there. You came over. You brought some farm boards with you and one of your boys, and we got him right in the cage. Yeah, for real. That was really fun too, because he was now Mr. World Series champ now. At the time, but we definitely. When I was over there, I think it was kind of an interesting thing too as well. It's so funny thinking back to that moment, because I remember we were doing some of these drills. We even had him doing reverse leg kicks and stuff, and he was smoking some balls. And I remember you saying like, "Bro, those are some of the cleanest balls you've hit." that was a fun time though. But yeah, so we originally met over there, and then also too, it came in. Spent some time with you in spring training and some things as well. We like shared notes with like players and all those different things too. But so many different insights. So why don't you kind of just give us just the kind of backstory too, just on the same sense of start back with the earliest baseball and like how that kind of progressed into today. Yeah, I was gonna see how deep do you really want to go? I didn't get a script for this, so
yeah, no. Start us from when did you start playing? I don't even know any of this stuff.
Yeah, I grew up in a small town, Farmington, New Mexico. There's not a whole lot going on there. We got oil, gas. We got the National High School Rodeo there.
Hey,
Connie Mack World Series.
Connie Mack, baby.
Yeah, growing up as a kid, I think you see the Connie Mack kids roll in, and they look like big leaguers to you. So
yeah,
I think just growing up there, rodeo and baseball and football, wrestling, those were all kind of the options. But when Connie Mack came around, the town shuts down for it. So it was kind of cool just to be a part of that growing up and getting to go stand like behind the fence and catch the home run balls during the home run derby. Like those are memories that I'll have forever.
For sure.
So I think just that was kind of like my first intro into baseball. I don't really come from a sports family, so I did have my grandpa is from Texas, and he was actually a Texas Rangers fan, Nolan Ryan fan. So, that was kind of the first.
Do you think that was like, I'm just interested too with this, is like, do you think that your family not being in the sports was like a plus for you, or pluses and minuses there? Like, because I know, like, for example, some families are super in the sports and dad's a little overbearing, or like some of those things. Like my mom was like, could care less how I did. So like we had a pretty good relationship driving home. Like, do you feel like that was like a plus or minus for you when you kind of look at that?
Oh, it was definitely a plus. I don't think we ever had any of those conversations. I think my parents are blue collar, hardworking people. Growing up, my dad, he was trying to find jobs, doing things. Ended up working in a gold mine for 3 or 4 years up in Colorado. Like, we were living in a trailer park at the time. So, there's
gangster.
My family's just trying to survive, and sports was an outlet for me that I got to be a part of. And my parents supported me wholeheartedly through it. They did whatever they could, take me to tournaments, take me to camps, try to get me some exposure, because Farmington's a super small town. It's not really accessible.
What'd your mom do?
She actually used to drive like loaders at a gravel pit.
Wow.
So she did that for
Yeah,
a
good
while.
call her.
Yeah, and then she
Especially for a mom. Good for her.
yep, and then she started working at a belt buckle company and started making belt
Wow.
buckles with people.
What a unique
Bro,
one.
my parents are grinders,
Yeah.
man. Like they
Yeah.
come, they did what they could to give my sister and I life. So you
Yeah.
know, I thank them for that too. So
Interesting point, just not to do that is I actually didn't know that, but Donnie Ecker, same thing, grew up in a trailer park, was in what's this town over here in California? It's like this little small on the way to LA. I'm trying to think
Barstow?
Barstow. It was either I want to say Barstow maybe is where Donnie grew up, but it was kind of same thing. Like he just interesting, backstory too, because again, also built that like blue collar, like in him, and then mine very similar too, right? Like didn't grow up with a lot of money either, so I think like that grind and also the parents like mindset and some of those things as well, like makes it easier to work. It's just habit. Like you just been doing it since I was young,
Yeah.
kind of how to fend for yourself in some ways and figure out some things, and yeah, could be a definite big plus there. So okay, so and then when did you start playing baseball? Like what age? Do you remember off the top of your head?
4 or 5 years old.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I was definitely, I have a kid now and he doesn't look like he's 18 months. He looks like a 3-year-old. And I
Yeah.
assumed that I was the same type of kid because I always played a couple levels up in a small town.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, all the way from T-ball all the way up, that was a sport I fell in love with.
Nice. What other sports did you play?
I played a little bit of basketball, a little bit of football, but neither of them stuck.
Yeah.
If I was playing either of those sports, they were for baseball.
Yeah, yeah. I get it.
But yeah, I played high school.
Did you guys have? I know when I was younger, I would play like per season, like what was ever in season. Did you guys have baseball more like year round, or did you kind of just hop from like sport to sport based on like what season it was, or like how was that for you?
Yeah, just in like middle school years, I was kind of into dirt bikes and snowboarding. So I took part in that whenever baseball season wasn't going on.
Yeah.
And then I think when I got into about 8th grade, they started having fall ball leagues. And that was like the first time that kind of had happened in our town.
Yeah.
So it was like, that was perfect time for me. Like
Yeah.
going into high school, it was
Same.
like, yeah,
That's
I was
what I
playing
did too.
baseball pretty much year round.
Yeah.
With that, which, it was great. And one of the coolest things I think growing up in Farmington was they built this place called the Strike Zone. It was, modeled kind of similar to what we got going on here, but, that was kind of a safe haven for me because I didn't really feel like not necessarily that I didn't fit in places. It was like my mind was only focused on baseball and there wasn't anything there for that. So when that place opened up, it was my parents would drop me off there, they'd go work, and I'd get to spend 3 or 4 hours just hitting in the cage. And it was like there was no intent. I was just trying to hit cage bombs. And
Yeah.
that was fun to me. And I got to meet a lot of players, a lot of kids from other teams and schools, because I actually grew up in Aztec, New Mexico, which is 10 minutes outside of Farmington, but Farmington's our big city.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, I think that was a big part of my life that I think continued to push me down the baseball route for sure.
Yeah. So, and then also, with that as well, is what position did you play?
I played third base.
Third base.
Yeah.
Yeah, I played a good amount of third. I honestly played on a lot of different teams along with it. There were some teams where like I was the youngest on the team, and then there were some teams where I was like the oldest on the team. But I usually played like 2 age groups up a lot of the time too. And then also too, we talk about that a lot as well. It's like, when you get to high school, you're going to play 4 years, but playing against people that are 4 years older than you. Get to college, that could be 6 years older than you, and you got super seniors now, and like all the different things and all the red shirts you could do, and all that too as well. So I think that's interesting, like growing up that way as well. What when did you start feeling like you were interested more in like the other side also of the game too? Of like was that something that when you were younger, where you started like being just interested like about the body or interested about performance, or like what kind of sparked that for you?
I'd say the strike zone, like that batting cage, like that was a play dartfish. They were running dartfish. That was like the first where you could basically take your swing and match it to a big league guys. And it was like, that's,
I did that with Side View Pro.
Yes,
day.
bro.
I was big on that.
Yeah. Like I would anything dial up internet, man. We were online, like trying to find like videos of like what a swing should look like, because it was like you got to a point where you were hitting the cages for 3 or 4 hours a day. It was like, okay, I need to work on something, not just try to hit cage bombs. So
yeah
That was where I was kind of exposed to it, and a lot of those guys just had bigger mindsets than just like playing high school baseball. So
Yeah.
that was when I really started to take ownership, I would say, in my career, where it was something that I came like extremely passionate about.
Yeah.
But the body, I had our football coach in high school was basically our strength coach, and they used to have like
Yep.
the leaderboards of the bigger, faster, strongers, and it was
Yep.
like I was always 1, 2, 3. So it was like
Yeah.
I gravitated a little more towards the weight room because I was good at it. Like
Yeah.
people tend to do that,
Yeah,
right? So
for
it was
sure.
like baseball and weightlifting were kind of my things.
Yeah.
I ended up having meniscal surgery in my between junior and senior year.
Mhm.
And I firmly believe it was from my technique from power cleaning.
Yeah.
So, looking back at that, it was like there's a lot of injuries that I've had that could have been prevented if I
Yeah,
would have been not necessarily more informed, because I felt like the people that were trying were doing their best.
Yeah.
I did felt cared for, but at the same time, like there
You're
was
younger.
technique.
I
Yeah.
would say when I was also too, when like you're younger in general, it's like you also have a naivety. It's like, like I'm not gonna get hurt, or like,
Right. You feel
like,
invincible.
yeah, I feel invincible. It's like I'm not worried about that.
Right.
But and then in reality, like you're like, oh yeah, like this stacked on top of it, over and over and over again. And because again, that blue collar background and those other things, I think they almost kind of go hand in hand. Where like you almost have to like a lot of blue collar mindset is like overlooking obstacles or like things that potentially could happen. And it's just like I got to do this, or it is what it is, right? And yeah, I got to take risk. Like that's how you make it
Right.
through. Is like like risk assessment is teetered a different way. But I also think interesting with that too is I also had a ton of a lot of these like soft tissue like injuries or things like that. As like when we and it was like I used to call them like yeah, they're overuse, or I used to call them more like misuse, like misuse injuries, I guess you could call it that way. But it was just like like overworking. Like I like a lot of like I think there's a lot of people that never have to worry about that because they literally just don't work hard enough where it's never gonna happen. But it was the opposite for me. Like my body could not keep up with what my brain wanted to do. And like, again, when I look back now and look at the volume of what I was doing and the crap. I mean, I remember one time at our cages down the street at academy that I grew up in on deck baseball academy was when we didn't have the car. Like I'm like, all right, I'll just take the bike. I'll take my bike. And so I went and went there. Then also too, Taylor's uncle was training us, so I rode my bike to his house. Then we did a bunch of stuff, and I rode back, and then came back home. And my dad was like, "Oh, like like how far did you go today?" And I'm like, so I did the little GPS thing on my phone, and I was like, "Oh, it was like 15 miles." Like, and he's like, what? Like, and I'm like, and then I'm thinking back, like, yo, like that would have destroyed me. Like now it would destroy me just to ride 50 miles. Like I was riding to the house to work out, like,
Yeah.
like, and it was like, or I was going to the cages to work out. Like, it's like, that was just my transportation, like to get there. And just like at the time, not even thinking about those things of anything to do with my body. It was like, that was like a workout before the workout. And I was just like, yeah, like that's what I have to do to be able to get this done. And I think about that, like, like that more that blue collar mindset. It was like, it wasn't even a thought in my head. It's like, well, yeah, I just got to get there so I can work out.
That's what
Like,
you got to do, man.
yeah, just it is what it is. Like, you know what I'm saying? I don't got to ride. Like, what am I do? Stay at home? Like,
Right.
ride my bike over there. Like, it is what it is,
Yep.
But I think that with that though, that mindset, like while it being a strength in certain areas, it definitely isn't the most intellectually driven. It's more like work ethic than
Right.
it is anything. Like even like work fast and hard, and even if it's not in the greatest direction, it's just like like you just like work harder basically. And so when things didn't work out in my favor, like I would just like work harder. Like my main mindset was like work harder, work harder, work harder, work harder. But then obviously you get to a point where, well, like which direction you're working in does matter.
Right.
But in the very beginning, I think like why that's a mindset for a lot of people is because like they're just really not working hard enough in the first place, which is a different thing. But yeah, so I had a lot of injuries like that from just, again, the same thing too. I started, I would have certain, like my low back would be hurting and my knees would be hurting, or I didn't really have a ton of knee issues, but definitely back.
Yeah.
Like I was a lot of, low back stuff that happened to me, especially I think the first time I started really feeling anything like that was like high school. But that's when I also was when I started lifting more, and I was and also too doing things like beach workouts, like
Yeah.
even though we're in Vegas and hadn't really been to the beach.
I remember one of the first, like, once I busted out into college, like, one of the first books I bought, it was called Huge, and it was a bodybuilding, like, book,
Yeah.
like, filled with all the nutrition,
Yeah.
all the hydration, and then at the back of the book was a program, and it was like, let's run with this, bro.
Yeah, this is.
Let's
gonna
see
get
what
good.
we could do.
Yeah,
like,
let's
see
see what's up.
how much muscle we could stack on.
Yeah. Which is also interesting too. I think the other thing is I think there's also a naivety because typically when you're younger, my interpretation of this too is like a lot of athletes, they're literally just not even strong enough to hurt themselves. Like, you know what I'm saying? They don't create enough force yet, right? But they already have some of those pattern dysfunctions, but it's just like, it's not enough force where it's like, if a pro athlete was moving like that, like they would get hurt, right? But like, you just don't create enough force to like be able to hurt yourself yet. Like, and the reason I think about this is like, for example, at a pretty young age, like probably below like 13 and under, right? For most kids, probably, honestly, probably like 14, 15 and under for most kids right across the nation. They don't even create enough force to break their bat. Like they would, like a wood bat, like they don't hit the ball hard enough to have enough force to break the bat. And then all of a sudden, like 14, 15, 16, 17, those things start snap. And it's like, well, you're finally strong enough. And the person throwing the ball is strong enough, right? To like throw a ball at a high rate of speed and then you be able to swing a bat at a high rate of speed where the bat can actually break. But like, you know, a lot of little kids, like you'd have to like hit concrete or you'd have to hit, like that bat is not breaking. And then also too, I guess now I'm getting deep with this. Also, probably an interesting thing is the lever is shorter because they're using a smaller bat, which then also would put less pressure on the bat too. So I think probably like all of those mixed together. But I think about that with injuries a lot too. It's just like you're just literally not strong enough to hurt yourself yet.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, like dysfunction that way. But yeah, and then so you start stacking strength on top of bad patterns.
Catastrophe.
Yeah, some bad things happen. So what kind of, you know, from that in high school, when you went to what was that process like, that transition from high school into college and that process for you? How did that look like for you?
Funny enough, man, it's a true story. My freshman year of college, I loved the game of baseball, but I wasn't the most intelligent baseball player.
Same.
I was never really, and this is partially my fault, but I was never really taught necessarily like the mental side of the game. I always just thought that the physical side was the more important part and going to be the primary thing that carried me to the next level and to the next level and to the next level. You know, so I was doing stupid stuff on the weekends and like hanging out with the boys and just not necessarily one track mind of like, if I want to get to the next level, it's going to take all these things.
Yeah.
It was like, I have all this free time. Now I got to go fill it with fun. Right. And, so, you know, I had a coach I went to Shasta Junior College after high school. And my coach, I basically enjoyed my freshman year. And at the end of the year, he basically told me that I needed to get in better shape. And it was a gut check for me. And it was like, okay, I'm going to go play summer ball in Oregon and I'm going to work out all summer. I'm going to follow a diet. But, you know, that costs money too. So my buddy and I that I was living with at the time, we ended up like going and painting houses. It was called like college pro painter. And so like during the day, like we didn't have time to screw around. Like we had to go make money, then we had to go to practice.
Yeah.
And then we got to wake up and do it all over again. So it was actually a good setup for me. But like, again, that was kind of like where I started to hone in a little bit better of a work ethic and focus a little bit more on like kind of all aspects of the game. But yeah, that summer I would say was one of the like biggest insights to me of like, you know, I got my work ethic back. I got the distractions out of my life and now I can focus a little bit more on baseball. And so the following year I went back, had a decent season. Our team did pretty well. And, you know, fell back in love, I could say, with the process and not just the game. And, you know, I feel like each level that, like, after I transferred from that school, I ended up going to Corban University in Oregon. It was a blessing of an opportunity, got to meet a lot of great people, learned a lot about myself and made a lot of mistakes too along the way that I, you know, regret, but learn from. So, you know,
What did you major in junior college?
I didn't major in anything. I just basically got my associates and then went into
What was your degree in though?
exercise science and kinesiology.
Okay.
Yeah. So in junior college, I started as a construction management major.
Okay.
Uh,
I majored as a criminal justice major. I wanted to
okay.
be a cop. That was so yeah. That degree also switched
Yeah.
over as well. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, I actually wanted to be a construction guy, so
Mhm.
but I think the economy had kind of taken a hit at that time, and it was
Mhm.
like I really didn't know what I was gonna do, but I was still passionate about working out
Yeah.
and lifting. And so whenever I transferred to that school, like I got in that program and
Mhm.
just kind of ran with it. And crazy enough, man, I struggled with a lot of injuries. And again, it wasn't necessarily from like messing around, but it was like I was working hard. I was in the
Mhm.
gym. I was leading groups of guys that just wanted to get better. Like we were
Mhm.
all in the gym just smashing weights,
Yeah.
and we loved it, man. It was part of it. Like if we couldn't sleep at night, we had the key to the batting cages. We'd roll up to the field and hit 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning,
Mhm.
and go back to school, take your couple classes, and then
Yeah.
go back to the gym, bro. And it
I
was
know.
like,
People talk about that all the time where they go like there's like college is like a busy time for some people and things too, but also I've never had more free time in my life. Like
yeah,
like again, you go get after and you get your stuff done and X, Y, and Z with it, right? But it's like you don't have a ton of like your responsibilities are going to school and playing, right? And it's like so I think on the other side of that too, especially you lived up in the same area I did. At that time, it's like it snowed a lot. In junior college specifically, right? It's like, dude, there's 3 feet of snow on the ground. I came from Vegas. It's like, bro, I don't, like some guys are out there like, yeah, I'm going snowboarding this weekend, and like they were gonna like live up in the snow. Me, I'm like, I don't even know what to do with this stuff. Like, it's like I'm in Vegas. Like it literally snowed like 2 times in my life, and it was like an inch of snow, and swipe it off, and like that was the life. So it's like, we had a lot of dead time, and a lot of times with that it was the same thing with like weight room and training and like all that stuff, and then I think also just a interesting time like you're saying as well. It's like we say that a lot for a lot of players as well. Is like when they start working out, it's like all these injuries start happening and all that stuff too. Which is again, you're in the weight room. Not only are you now able to create more force to do things, but also like you're stacked. If there's a lot of these patterns that are now getting, like that are now getting more. Uh, Depth and pattern, right? Or like again that pattern's getting more ingrained, and it's like deeper and deeper and deeper because now you're stacking load on top of it and making the body care about how it does that, and like doing that more and more. And I just remember like the same thing, like started having injuries and stuff about like things like I had never had. And for me too, like the other thing was like in college was my arm had never hurt.
yeah,
Like my whole life, my arm had never hurt, right? And then my arm had never hurt. And then, same thing. But I was also, dude, guys hated playing catch with me because like I'd be like 6 throws in, I want to go to the fence. Like I'm like my body, like even now, right? Like I warm up really like pretty quick,
yeah,
like movement wise and like all that stuff. Like the same thing is like I used to think about that. It's like now when I'm doing throwing or something like that, like or places I've had injuries, like again, like takes a little bit longer. Like in some of those
yeah,
areas, they open some of that stuff up. But I remember the same thing with that. It's like, man, I was like when the first time I had like my arm being sore, or like having any arm issues was like when I was in college as well. But okay, so then you went to would you
Corbin University.
Corbin? That's right.
Yep.
And then that's a NAI, right?
Yeah, small NAIA
Yeah.
school. Yep.
And
We didn't have
where's
snow. We had a lot
where's
of rain
where's Corbin at?
in Salem, Oregon.
Salem, Oregon.
About
Salem.
30, 40 minutes but south of Portland.
Yep.
About an hour north of Eugene.
That whole area is
It's a
really
sweet spot, dude.
yeah. That whole area is first off like I know I've never been to Salem specifically, but just Oregon and that area in general though is like just gorgeous, especially if you're
Beautiful.
from Vegas. Like there's ain't nothing. It's just like you go out in those areas like again like you got national forests like all over the place, and then also I mean like trees I've still to this day that's like some of the biggest trees I have ever seen. It's just like
Mhm.
again if you're used to like a fig tree like half the plants in Vegas look like that fake tree that's next to you is the you go out there, it's like, man, we could have 5 people and like we can't wrap our arms around this tree. Like this tree is humongous. Like,
Yeah.
and so I think it's a crazy, it's a
Got
cool
some of the oldest
experience.
trees in the world there.
Yeah, wild. Yeah, and so that's also a very different way of life, dramatically different way of life. Okay, so then when you got there, what did you major in when you got to Corbin? Was it again just that
Exercise science, kinesiology. Yeah.
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 Okay. And then with that too, what um was when you were taking those classes? Was it more like, okay, I'm a jock, so I want to take sports classes that I'm things I might be interested in, or was it like, did you really like, oh, I'm gonna do this? This is gonna be my career. This is something I'm gonna get into after this.
It was more of a jock thing. Like
Yeah.
honestly, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was still banking on baseball, which like to be honest with you, looking back, like that ship had probably sailed the year before.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But in my mind, it was almost a procrastination type thing, and it was a blessing in disguise. Like I said, going back to it, I had a bunch of injuries. Most of them had to do with my hamstrings. And then I also tore my serratus anterior. So I struggled a little bit just staying on the field.
Yeah.
That was very depressing for me. It was tough to go through that, like, and feel that, and not have anybody to talk to. Like,
For sure.
everybody just be, oh, he's soft. It's like, actually, no, I'm one of the hardest working people
Yeah.
out of this group. Like,
Yeah.
and you could push me until I break, which I was breaking myself pretty often, man.
Yeah.
So,
very often, yeah.
I think just,
And they kind of lead into one another, right, too, as well. It's like, because this means so much to me, and that's why I work the way that I do. But then it was, the rugs pulled from underneath me, which now feeds in because of what was driving me is also what's making it so hard and I'm struggling now with is because, again, I used to do this thing too. It's like, I'm trying to rush back from injuries and I'm trying to like get back on the field before I'm ready. Like I remember when again, same thing, like I broke my hand, had surgery on my hand. It's like the moment the doctor was like, yeah, like, you're cleared from like basic textbook clear. I'm like,
had a bat in your
game.
hand,
Yeah, I'm like, it's game day. Like, let's go, baby.
Velo off the machine.
100%. Like all the things, right? So I was like, but again, they like kind of feed each other, like you're saying.
Yeah.
Is that sometimes on that mix, and then I remember too, like also a different time as well. And I know that you're a little older than me, so it's probably even worse.
Oh, easy,
You said, oh, hold on. But no, but like with that, right, is like there was this mentality because of the schools and stuff that I was at. It's like, like, oh, you're going to the training room, like, it's like almost like a soft thing.
Like
yeah.
that,
you know what I'm saying? Like, oh, you're in the training room. It's like, yeah, bro, I freaking strained my hamstring. yeah, bro. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm trying to get back on the field or doing whatever, right? It's like, and so I think that that's also another thing too, as well. The good male ego of like, yeah, I'm actually like hurt. I would like to be fixed. But so I'm sure on that side it was probably even tougher at that point because at least I had a couple more years that was, moving somewhat towards that direction, and people were starting to see the benefits of arm care and health and training and all that stuff too. So when you got there, at what point did you, when you were like in the weight room and all that stuff, is that at one point you started kind of thinking about like coaching, or when did that kind
of? It's hard to say because like I said, I had those issues with my hamstrings. I had rehabbed myself back into playing, and I think 7 or 8 games into the season, I was popping off, having a great start to the season. I had slid into, obviously, Oregon, it rains. There's a lot of turf there. I had slid a little too late into a bag and kind of jammed my tibia on my femur, and I got a microfracture.
Ooh.
Done to my femur. It was a hairline fracture, and then I ended up, my meniscus was torn, and I also tore my ACL at the same time.
Oh, okay.
So that was kind of when the book had closed for baseball for me. I did rehab that back. That was a long rehab process, full year. And then finished playing my senior year. I only had one class in college to finish. But ended up playing my last year. But there was a point in that time that it was just like, I can't play and compete at the level that I want to, and it got very depressing for me.
For sure.
So it was sad but easy to hang my cleats up because I had already felt it. Yeah, and like mentally, like
with my arm.
Yep.
I guess it's just gone.
So it was crazy though. A sad thing, I lost one of my cousins during this time, like after I just had my surgery and I was flying back home, and some random guy, like I don't know what I had. I must have had like a Shasta college shirt or Corbin shirt. I don't know what I had on, but he started talking to me, and he was a scout for the Arizona Diamondbacks. And so ended up, having a good conversation with that guy. And he's like, well, what are you going to do now? And I was like, I got no idea. So he had a buddy in Phoenix, Keith Wilson, at Pro Advantage Training, that had been training big league guys. He was a player in the minor leagues.
Yeah.
that had his own place in Arizona, and he was like, "Well, hit this guy up. Like maybe he'll give you an internship." And I still hadn't done my internship at that time, so it worked out because I got to his location is paired with Physiotherapy Associates,
Mm-hmm.
and this is kind of really where it all started for me.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'd basically wake up in the morning, I'd go do my rehab
Mm-hmm.
with the PT side, and literally walk over and do my internship with the strength side.
Yeah.
So it was like I got to see the blend of the two, and like that was kind of the process that they had rolling there. And it was for me, it was cool because I got to work with big league guys. I got to work with minor league guys. It was like,
Yeah.
and coming from Farmington, dude, and the schools that I went to weren't like, wasn't playing with all these big players, right?
Yeah.
So for me, it was still like being in that environment. Like I felt a level up, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so like that paired with the training and like learning about the body again and how to
Yeah.
fix it and
Would
know.
you say, I'm thinking interested in this too. Would you say, because this was me for sure, I'm interested if you would agree with this too as well. Would you say that at your root, because of how you like that blue collar, like training and all that stuff too, that you had more of like a base of like, everybody has like a different base of like where they start. Like, let's say you did gymnastics your whole life. It's like, okay, well, that's like a base of like your knowledge that you come from. For me, my base was being a meathead. Like I was just trying to lift as much weight. Like I was trying to be the strongest, like, you know, cause that's what I was always told. Is like, I wasn't strong enough cause I was smaller in stature, like all these other things. So I just got really strong. Right. Problem was it wasn't transferring to the field. I was
Yeah.
strong as hell and I destroyed everybody in the weight room. But I just remember doing that. It's like, dude, like all these guys are like, that guy gets out 100 pounds on me and I'm 3 times his weight, or like, you know, what I'm able to pull. Would you say that like your base came from a place of like brute strength and then kind of like learned some of the other like more technical side of things from there? Or what would you say, like if you had to say, like if you had to come, or some people have like Olympic background base, like
Yeah.
that's like they really go from that side. What would you say like that base is for you?
I'd say my base is kind of a blend between Olympic lifting and brute strength. The first program I'd ever been exposed to was the Bigger, Faster, Stronger program. And dude, I'm not gonna lie, I loved that program because you didn't have to think, like,
Yeah.
and that was a big part of it. For
Was it
me, is,
more,
like,
was it a lot of like just progressive overload and
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, you were deadlifting as heavy as you could, you were benching as heavy as you could,
Yeah.
you were cleaning as heavy as you could, you'd box squat as heavy as you could, and like
Mhm.
again, like the whole intent was to put your name at the top of that top 10 list, right?
Yeah.
And it was like that for me. I found comfort in that space.
Yeah.
I found
easy to
like
understand?
yeah, dude, I wasn't running around like this was in high school. I wasn't running around like doing stupid things. Like I was lifting. Like
Mhm.
I wanted to lift.
Mhm.
And for me, it gave me this sense of security. The weight room did in general. Like it just gave me this sense of security of like this is my space. Like I enjoy it. I enjoy learning about the body. But at that time, like I had a lot of stuff inside of me that, you know, I felt
Yeah.
like I was under a microscope that like I couldn't get out.
Mm.
And so when I went in the weight room, I was able to get some of that anger and frustration out. So,
Yeah.
you know, it
Same.
was a place
Yeah.
where I found peace, to be honest with you.
Oh yeah, for sure. Same. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I'd say like, you know, Cody actually said this the other day too, is especially when like you're younger, he was like, you know, it's like almost like, what are those rooms called when you go in there and you can like break everything? I forgot what those rooms are called.
Yeah, like a break.
Like a chaos room
Yeah.
or whatever the heck. I forgot what it's called. But yeah, it's like, what'd you say, Tay? Wreck-It room or something. Yeah. It's like one of those things, like as well. It's like the weight room is kind of that for me. I'm like, I'm gonna go throw some weights around. Like I'm gonna go release a ton of energy. Like again, built up frustration, all those things. Like squeeze the hell out of something. You know,
Yeah.
like my testosterone's gonna come out. Also too, again, obviously physiologically at the time, is like we got a lot of raging testosterone at that
Mhm.
time. You know, in your life too.
I feel like too, like as a kid, like you grow up, you almost grow up more with a fixed mindset, right?
For
To
sure.
where it's like what you're good at now is what you're always going to be good at, and that's it.
Yeah.
And for
Yeah.
me at that time, like there had been a lot of people that were, you know, that where I grew up, like people weren't building each other up; they were breaking each other down.
Yeah.
And it was
pull each other back in the
a
bucket.
very hostile place to grow up, man. Like just
Yeah.
the environment was all around. So
Yeah.
you know, the weight room was a place where it was like I am good enough. You know what I mean? And I'm
Mm.
gonna prove it to myself, and that's all I have to prove it to.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, no, and I think again, along with it, like you said, is like when you start to build up experiences and also get in the right circles where you've seen people change and develop and all those things. And I say this a lot too. It's just like, for example, like now it's like I'm such contrary to the opposite way, because like because I think also just my basis of like faith within God, right? It's like, if you don't believe people can change, well, then you don't know God, right? And it's just like, because I've seen him dramatically change people's lives, and like not only like who they are, like what they find important, how they process things, like how kind they are, how loving they are, the skill sets they have, like all of these other things can dramatically change. And so like I feel like on the same side of that with you as well, it's like, but I was around a bunch of people that weren't trying to change, right? And so like I had to get outside of that environment and go, and again, around, like I grew up at the academy, for example, like there was a lot of pro guys that were in there, and like they obviously had very different mindsets. And it was like, I referenced that book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, a ton, but it was kind of like that, right? It was like my family had this very fixed mindset, like we'll always be broke, we'll always kind of do these things. And then when, I got around all these guys, it's like, what are we doing, bro? Like, like
Yeah.
kind of entices me, like, too, like, yeah, things can change. Like, you just got to work. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, it's like, it's going to take some a different effort, and you're going to have to do these other things. But yeah, like, it doesn't have to always be this way. Like, you can make decisions and change your life and like do all these other things. And so like, that was a different perspective for me too, which is also one of those reasons, like weight room wise, is like, I saw things change. Like when I got more physical, and at first it did give me some bumps on the field, right? Like I was mishitting balls and hitting them harder, and I was doing some of those things. I got a little jump right before I plateaued, right? Like I got a little jump there, right? And I did need to get stronger. I mean, I got into college, I was I think I was 5'8", 155 pounds, right? So it's like when I got there, it was like, yeah, like I needed to get more physical and needed to eat some food and do some things, and finally, like, my metabolism slowed down, slightly. But I think that's just with that is like, again, along with that is like, when you start to see that when you're young, you don't know as many stories, you don't have enough evidence, right? And also, if you're not hanging out in the right groups or around the right people, or you're letting the wrong voices, like, like into our mindset, that like you can get this fixed place where there's, nothing's going to change, right? And, I think about that even too with like our family, for example. It's like, now when I look back, it's like, again, we have two business owners in our family right now. Like me and my older brother, and my other brother works for my other brother, and they got one of the biggest, businesses here in town for marble and granite installation, all that stuff. It's like, my dad was just worked for those companies and was just laid tile, and like, and again, look at those, very blue collar, again, like, was trying to support a whole family on like 50K and 6 people in the family. And like, we were grinding, you know what I'm saying? And like, I never feel like I went without, cause I felt like our family, like my dad and my mom, would like find a way. And I also felt like we were like almost like it preached into me like kind of a soft thing if I felt like I didn't have it, right? It's like, you need that, like how soft. It was kind of like that mindset. Like you really need that to be happy. Like, come on, bro. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, get your stuff together. Like that was kind of like our family. Like we're used to being without. So it's like when I went without, it was just like, I didn't really process it like I'm missing anything. It's like, my brothers are right here. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like they're going without too. It's like, how am I? It's not like poor me. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and
it's just the way it was, man.
Just how it was.
And there's no reasoning behind it. Like as a kid, that's just the way it is.
Yeah. It's just like, okay, well, I used to play with rocks, and like, I mean, we did all kinds of, like, I go to the park, like, bro, give me my bike. I'm gone all day.
Oh yeah.
I don't need
bikes, build jumps.
I'm going to come back. Same thing. My dad used to do that too. And actually, it's so funny now that I think back, is, like I used to build my own ramps, like you're saying, right? And it's like kind of made me handy. It's like, bro, oh my God, when I think back to some of the most random wood that I used, and I just it looked like Frankenstein of ramps. Like I just put pieces together in this thing, and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to jump it. I'm gonna jump it and blow my back out. I don't know. Like,
you grew up in the concrete jungle, man. We didn't have the wood. We had dirt. We had shovels, and we had garden hoses to soften up the dirt a little bit.
Wow. Yeah. I definitely wasn't. I had we were like out in the street, and I just would grab like whatever wood my dad was like, he said I could use, and I would just be like 50 nails in this thing, just trying to hold it all together, all different shapes and like different woods. Like, I mean, it was Frankenstein.
And you were the test dummy.
Oh yeah. And then every once in a while, the ramp would just break. He just like go to ride it and, scrape my elbow or do whatever. Right. And just like, I remember just having so many, all those things of, just coming home, and it's like, I got a big scrape on my face, and I'm like, yeah, like I fell or something like that.
I mean, what you just described is pretty much my college career. You know what I mean? Like
college career.
You know, I felt like I was like held together by certain parts of my body, and it was like, you know, after I'd done that internship with Keith, kind of opened my eyes up to the industry. I didn't know that there were strength and conditioning coaches in professional baseball. I had
Yeah.
no idea that you could make $1 doing that.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, I could still stay in baseball. You know what I mean? Like I was looking at being a college coach or something.
Yeah.
Which is another great option. But you know, this kind of just had, like, God willing, fell into my lap, man. It was like I didn't deserve it. I didn't deserve any of those opportunities, but they fell in my lap. And like the one thing I did know was work. Like, and so I might not have been the smartest person in that room, but I was gonna outwork you, and I would let people know it. You know what I mean? And I think, you know, that was
Caller, baby.
yeah, dude, that was, you know, that was what I knew. And so like whenever I was uncomfortable and I didn't feel like I knew something, or I felt insecure about myself, like I knew I could work. And so I just stayed focused on that.
Get better at it. I'm gonna work at it.
Yeah, and it was like, you know, I was very fortunate. I got picked up by the Diamondbacks very shortly, you know, after leaving college. And you know, I still don't know why they gave me that opportunity, but I was more than blessed to have that with that group of people that were over there. Very smart, very intuitive, you know, always digging on for the next thing. And it was like I had been like thrust into this environment where you have to learn. And it was like, that was something that really challenged me. Was I guess not challenged me, but I was
how
like,
old were you two when you first went with him?
22,
Oh,
23. So pretty
Yeah.
fresh out of college, man.
Fresh.
Green. I didn't know anything.
Fresh.
I knew how to squat,
Yeah.
lift, deadlift, press, and pull.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so when I got with the Diamondbacks, it was like I was stuck in this fixed mindset of like, I'm a worker. You know what I mean? And that organization, they really challenged me to grow. And it was like, that's when I came across, you know, not having that fixed mindset, of having more of a growth mindset and being able to be vulnerable, I would say, and say that I don't know, and not have an ego. And, you know, I think the ego was what was keeping that fixed mindset around with me. So I think once I realized that I can learn new things and I can apply those new things, like the sky was the limit for me at that time. Obviously, like pro ball is a little bit more restrictive on like what you can, you know, try to do. Like here, there's a lot of freedom of like what we can try, and you know, what we know works, but science might say it might not. But it's like we know it works because we see it, we measure it.
Yeah, it we don't have to. And I think there's a place for that, right? Like, for example, you know, again, a lot of places, and also there's so much pressure where it's like, yo, we got to be able to quantify this.
Right.
Where, you know, ours, like, in the same thing, like here in like this type of environment, right, too, as well. It's like exploratory, like, well, if not here, where?
Yeah.
Like, where do you get to explore, right?
That's
like,
one of the things I was drawn to about,
Yeah.
you know, coming here, was being able to do some of that stuff. Cause it's like, I've seen guys work their butts off and lift themselves out of the game.
Yep.
I've also seen guys do absolutely nothing, stay on the field for 162 games,
Yes.
stay completely healthy, and hit 300.
For sure.
Like I've seen both, and it's like neither of them makes sense.
It's interesting,
right?
yeah. And I seen, like, you know, you also have had this experience too, where it's like, for example, like everybody always, you know, there's always this mantra around, like in youth baseball, it's like, well, D1 players or pro guys don't do this or don't do this. And I'm like, bro, now I've worked with so many, it's like, you know how many lazy pro guys that I know? Like, you know how many mentally not like the toughest, you know, pro guys that I've seen, and not in the greatest spaces, and like they could perform too. And again, like along with it, it's not that it's a bad message, but I think it's also something like for them, like people to keep in mind, is that, well, it's like everybody has their own like recipe of how they got there. Some guys are so like uber talented genetically, and it's like they're not great game plans. They don't have great approaches. They don't know what they've never struggled. So they don't know what it's like to, like, they've crushed at every level until they got to AAA. And now all of a sudden they're struggling, and they're like, their whole world is falling because they've never had someone that was better than them. They just haven't played against people that were better than them. And so I think that's also a thing, you know, for people to remember. It's like everybody needs their own recipe. A lot of times, which I'm not hating on with those coaches, is that they have to preach those things into their players because on average, that player isn't that good.
Yeah.
And so he does, in his recipe, you better be gritty and you better have all these other things. Like, I needed a lot of those mindsets because, like, I wasn't talented enough to not have that, you know? But like having that experience in that space, and then another thing is as well, it's like I also feel like you're exploring a lot more as well because at the end of the day, all these little traditional approaches or all these other things to do with it, it's like, well, if that was the thing, like you would already be good by now. Like
Right.
you have resources to all these people in the world. You've had 6 hitting coaches. You've played for 4 or 5 organizations, and no one anywhere has gotten you like, okay, well, we're gonna do some things, right? And also too, I challenge myself the same way with that is as well as like, well, I'm not comfortable with you not getting results, so I'll do. I'm gonna do whatever.
Yeah, we're gonna try some.
We're gonna
stuff.
try some stuff and like try to see if we can get you, to. I'm gonna invent something today, which I do a billion times a week,
Mhm.
to see if we can get you to this place where it gets this adaptation that we're trying to get to happen,
Yeah.
or creates a feel for you and all of that stuff. And so, yeah, I think it's a very different environment in that way too as well. But so when you okay, so now you're in pro ball. And then, with that as well, what would you say, like, since you were so green and you went in, what were your biggest kind of like initially, like just working in pro ball with that? Like, what were some like those, like, what'd you learn? What would you say, like, when you look back on that time, or if you're talking to someone that literally just was green and just got in the pro ball with that, like, what advice kind of like would you have there of things that maybe you learned, like,
Yeah.
in those first couple years?
First thing is just be comfortable being uncomfortable, not knowing things.
Yeah. That's huge for real.
Yeah, because you always have this place of self-doubt and like fear that you're not good enough,
Yep.
and especially
Imposter
those
syndrome a
yeah,
little
and especially in those environments. And it's like
Yeah.
a lot of the people that hire you, they believe in you as a person.
Yeah.
And they're giving you a chance based off of that, not necessarily
Yeah.
your resume. Your resume is great, your experience is awesome, but
Yeah.
that being said, like there's a lot that goes into developing a human being, right? And
sure.
I think that the willingness, the work ethic, I'd say work ethic, and then be comfortable, like being uncomfortable, not knowing
sure.
things,
Yeah.
are a great piece of advice, because that gives you this freedom to go explore and go learn.
Mm,
Whereas
yeah.
if you have more of that fixed mindset of like, why don't I know these things, or I'm
Yeah,
never
yeah.
going to know, I'm not smart enough. Like
Yeah.
it's this restrictive space that doesn't allow you to like become truly who you're supposed to be.
Well, and also like you said too, I think it's a big thing. I tell me and Nicole were talking about this the other day, and I think I might have mentioned it to you too, was just like having that real conversation with yourself of like, why are you supposed to know?
Right.
You've never experienced this before.
Never.
You've never done this before, right? You got thrown into, you had a great opportunity, all these other things. And also, too, I feel like when God moves with that, right, he's going to put you in opportunities that you feel like you're not prepared for, right?
Yeah.
Because, again, like he doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called, right? And so, like, with that, right, you can put you in situations where you're going to have a lot of imposter syndrome. And if you don't have that approach or that mindset, too, along with it, it's just like, again, like, we're really hard on ourselves. So, like, with that, it's just like, why are you supposed to know, right? And if you give yourself that freedom to like learn things and be like, okay, like cool. Like, oh, again, this is why I'm here, is
Yeah.
to learn
Exactly.
these different things or these other approaches
You're
or
not
how
there
to,
because of what you already know.
yeah, this is how I gain experience, is by doing and making mistakes. Like everybody with experience and like wisdom is like from mistakes. Like I can have conviction in what I'm talking to you about because I've made these mistakes and I've already made all these other trouble. And I think again, when you're trying to avoid all that, right, or you're trying to deflect everything and like act like you were right about everything, it's just like, dude, like you're learning slower because
Yeah.
you're trying to act like you know, when in reality, just being like, if you mark, Michael Todd actually does the thing, Drill, he does this series where he's like, it's like marked, and it's like, like really stating like where you're at, like, hey, this is where I'm at, this is what I know, this is what I don't know, all those other things. I think we're, I bet you agree here. It's like also early on, like the urge to act like and it's just like because you want to act the part.
When you think about your kid, like you'll tell him something that he doesn't know, but
Yeah.
as soon as you tell him,
He's
like,
like,
I know.
I
Like,
know.
Do you really tell me
Did
what
you?
you know then?
You were doing this for 35
Oh,
minutes.
you're right. I don't know.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, explain it to me then. Since you know.
But it's like that's
Yeah.
what I'm talking about. That's the ego. Like you don't
For
even
sure.
know it's there. It's always acting. It's always trying to
Correct.
control your life. And it's like
For sure.
at this point in my life, I'm in this not forced, but like offered into this environment to where it's learn, and if you don't know it, just keep asking questions, because there's somebody in that room that's going to be able to help you understand it.
Yeah.
And that at that moment, like I feel like it took me about a year or two to like grasp that. it was like, okay, this is the type of people I always want to be surrounded by,
Yeah.
because, you know, none of us are doing this because we already know the answers. Like,
Yeah.
we're chasing things that aren't even out there, right?
Yeah,
Like
that-
our brains,
like-
our creativity, like
Yeah.
everything that like we can imagine, that's what we're chasing, right? And
For
it's
sure.
like, if you have this fixed mindset, like your dreams become a whole lot smaller, your vision becomes a whole lot
For sure.
smaller. But yet with this growth mindset, it's like, and the work ethic, you know, I can do anything. I'll become a problem solver.
For
and
sure.
it's like, I watch you get in the cage with guys, and it's like, I'm trying to find a solution for this.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's a lot of unconventional things that
Their
get you
bodies,
there.
their bodies talking to me, right? How they're moving, their movement is talking to me, right? And it's like we're having a conversation, like me and their body. Sometimes they're not even involved; it's just me and their body, right? Like
Yeah.
they're like, I'm like, okay, I'm seeing how they're responding to certain cues and
And
drills.
them and their bodies having a conversation,
for
right?
sure,
Like,
right? And then figuring out, like, you know, again, we're having this dance, right? We're figuring
it's like
out
a fight,
what it
bro.
is.
They're trying to size each other up.
Yeah.
And get in the ring.
Trying to figure it out. Usually the first round, you guys are filling each other out and trying to, you know, like, okay, how does he respond when I do this? How does he respond when I do this? And we, you know, with that, right? And I think that it's an interesting thing there, like you're saying too as well. It's like when you get in those type of environments, like you said, once you have that contrast of how it can be in like in a growth, you know, mindset a place, it's like then when you go, it's so contrary to a fixed mindset place. You're like, then when you're in it, you're like, oh my God, it feels like toxic water. Like you're just
Yeah,
like,
dude, you're having a conversation with a brick wall sometimes.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it doesn't matter
100%.
what you say. Like, I could show you a piece of paper and it'd be yellow on one side and the other side it'd be brown.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that person's only going to see the yellow if I'm showing them the yellow. You know what I mean? It's like
100%.
perspective is a big part of that too, right? And it's like,
Yep.
you know, nobody out there is, not in this group anyway, is trying to one up anybody. I feel like, you know, we're all here because we're chasing answers, right? That aren't out there. And I feel like sometimes, you know, as a new guy, you can get caught up in like, there is an answer, there is a destination, but there's really not, man.
Really
like,
not.
you know, and if only the farm existed and no other place existed, we wouldn't be learning anything.
Yeah.
Right? Like there has to be, you have to have contrast. You have to have the sunshine. You have to have the clouds, right? To know what good or bad is, right?
Yeah. And even perspective, like you said, right? Like, for example, if someone else is explaining, like, oh, this is, you know, yellow side of this paper or whatever, these other things, you know, you asking too, just like, well, you know what? Why do you see it that way? And all those things is like, am I willing to walk on that side and sit in your shoes and see how you view movement or training or philosophy or what it's based on and what your foundation is? Like, you know, again, like having, like, people have backgrounds of Olympic, you know, training or whatever those things are. And it's like, they're going to view things different, or maybe they have a PT background, or maybe they have, you know, a physio background, or maybe they have, you know, like all of these things, or they're biomechanists. So they see things through these lenses. And also too, did they learn things traditionally from a schooling background? Because they're also going to view things differently.
Right.
Or did they learn things untraditionally? Because that's also going to change their lens as well. And then what are their influences, right? Like, for example, like, you know, like you were just asking me in the office, it's like, hey, like what books have you been reading on, you know, like fascia or this or that, or, you know, all these other things. And we're like, it's like, well, yeah, like, you know, again, like these are some major resources that I've had, or, you know, I took this from here and this from here and that from that and this from like, and then you create your own, you know, kind of philosophy, right? About like why you view things and why you're going to go about it the way that you are.
Yeah.
And then also life experiences too. Like, bro, it was crazy for me. Like when I started training martial arts, it changed my lens.
Mm-hmm.
Like that experience really did change how I trained athletes, right? And I learned a lot. I listened to how they coached. And then also as they coached me, I think one thing that I feel like I'm pretty decent at now is putting myself back in the beginner like mindset, like a beginner's mind. I don't know if you read that book, by the way. It's also a fire
I
book.
have not.
It's a Zen book, but it's called The Beginner's Mind. And it's like when you get into an expert brain, like there's few possibilities. In a beginner's brain, there's many possibilities. And so I'll put myself in a lot of times in these environments where like I know a good amount of things about the body, but I'll let them just coach me. Like I'll blank slate, walk in and be like, I'll do whatever you tell me to do. Right. Yeah. Like obviously other than something that's going to major, like injure me. But like, you know, in general, I'm like, okay, you could teach me whatever technique, however you want to teach me, the process you want to go about doing it. And again, I might do this for one day and never do it again. Right. But I'm going to learn something. I'm going to take pieces. I'm going to do whatever. And I think on the same side of that, there's a lot of lost wisdom that is still
in martial arts because it's so traditional that there's some things that they're doing now that they've been doing for hundreds of years. You get what I'm saying? Where it's like, again, along with that, it's like, that's also where it's super held back because it's so traditional. Like martial arts in a lot of ways, like there's a lot of people that aren't willing to move from some of these traditional, things, but also too, it's also a good filter because honestly, if they knew a lot more science behind it, like they're right about a lot of things. Like for example, like Tai Chi, right? Like Tai Chi, a lot of that, like, that's these, like they're like fascial glides and like learning the feel tension and like where it is and when, and like being able to pull out slack and like, learning proprioception and kinesthetic awareness and like a lot of the things that they're doing. And it's like, somebody else be like, well, they're not striking a bag or creating as much force and like all these things. And you can't, when they're doing that, right? And this is their training techniques and they're doing all their Tai Chi stuff, like other people would probably be looking at them being like, that's a waste of time. What are they doing? That doesn't create force. Like an American Western mindset is like, that's a whole waste. Why are they doing all of that?
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, like, again, there's actually a lot of, benefits to that. And also it roots back to me of when you have the humility to realize that no coach is making somebody do something because they've never seen results with it. They're doing it because they've seen results with somebody. They might be wrong in why they saw the results, but then that's when I get underneath the kind of the weeds of it, right? And go and asking like, hey, like, what are you trying to get from here, right? And, or, what's the intent behind, these things, or what's the lens you're seeing this from? Because maybe you could be, just like I say all the time with myself, it's like, I could be wrong about why it's working, but it obviously has worked, or I wouldn't be doing it.
Right.
Like I'm doing it because I've seen results with it before. I could be wrong on what I think it's actually doing, and maybe it's just helping him stay on his back leg. And, I was thinking it was something, for his, front arm or something or whatever. Right. But I just really liked this about it. Right. And, I've seen that a lot. Like, for example, like, a lot of old school wisdom within like how they used to train hitters of like rapid toss or something like that. Right. And it's like, oh, we're teaching balance and we're teaching this. And it's like, well, yeah, but there's actually a lot of depth of why, like, let me tell you why you were right. And also why you're actually more right than you even know that you're right. But then also too, there's this area over here where you were wrong about what you actually thought it was doing, right? Or whatever your philosophy maybe behind this. And if you can really learn like how that medicine really affects, or that corrective obviously really affects, with them, you can apply it to the right people and get even more results with it, right? And so I think that's another thing of looking at it from like that lens, is just having that mindset, around that, is just like, well, they're getting results with somebody, which is why they're doing that. Now, let me explore why they're getting results, and then I can take the real meat of this and maybe apply it and things as well. What would you say when, going back into you back in like pro ball in that environment and stuff too as well? Because you spent a lot of time in pro ball. It's 10 years, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So you spend a lot of time in pro ball as well. What when you also like just being in that those environments and like learning in those things as well. What do you think, on the same note as that, every industry, all different setups, right? Like same thing too, like private wise, like it doesn't matter where you are, like private, we have restrictions. Amateurs have restrictions, colleges have restrictions, pro ball has restrictions, like all of those things too as well, just because of like the requirements of like, for example, we got a game today. It's like every single day. And then it's like, you guys play, there's games, they usually, especially it matters what level you're at, but a lot of times they're playing till pretty late at night. And then you got all the things afterwards, like like MLB levels, like you got all the interviews and you got all the PR stuff and you got all these other things before these guys. I remember even when I've traveled with players is like, yo, like, the game got over, but he wasn't eating dinner till 1:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
He finally got home, finally got done with his PT, and then like, all right, we're eating or whatever, right? And it's like, okay, and then I gotta wake up, right? And then I got a PR thing, a press thing, or the team's doing this in the morning, and like all those other things too. So there's restrictions everywhere. But what would you say if, like, for example, like in that environment, like what did you like learn around like things that you were trying to like work around or like made it, also difficult, or things you had to adapt to, like in that setting?
In baseball and pro ball in particular, I would say recovery.
Yeah,
it's one of
huge.
It's the biggest.
It's the most amount of games you play at any level.
Right, and it's every single day, man.
Yeah.
And not only that is like you're traveling to different cities routinely,
Yes.
different time zones routinely,
Yes.
different nutrition environments routinely, different beds routinely,
Yeah.
right? Away from your family.
Away from your family.
Like there's
Food.
just
A lot of those
there's
guys
so
have
many
like personal chefs at home, and they don't have that either when you're traveling.
100% hydration level. Like
Yeah,
there's
hydration's huge.
recovery is like a premium in professional baseball. Like everything's
Huge.
go 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 go.
Well, and to your point there too, as well. If you look back at like even like when I was thinking about like the Ryan Braun when they with that, it's like I think about that as like how much weight most players lose throughout the year.
Or gain.
Yeah, right. And I thought about that as well. It's like I remember the Ryan Braun year. It was interesting to me because I remember this. It was late. It was like game 148 or something like that.
Yeah.
And he was like legging out this triple, like straight, like it was like week 3 or something like that. Like my boy was like full on fire, sprinting the third. And I remember thinking in my head, it's like, dude, I know how my legs feel because I remember being in college. I was like, my legs 48 games in,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or whatever it was, is like, bro, my legs are fried. And we're not even playing every day.
Yep.
Like, and I just remember those things. And I'm like, dude, like how important like recovery was. And then obviously from that way, like, he valued and the league values so much recovery that a lot of times people were using supplements, I guess you could say, enhancers, right? For recovery.
Mm-hmm.
Because like, they're just like, it is a performance enhancer for me to just feel like I'm at 100% every day. If I can get back to 100%, like, which is like most guys, that's what we don't think about. I think about this with football all the time. You're watching football and you're like, man, I can't believe you dropped that pass or whatever. It's like, bro, that guy's got a broken rib, whatever, right?
Yeah.
He broke his finger last week. He, strained his hamstring. We're watching them on TV thinking that guy's 100% healthy when like he's not, right? And most of those guys like throughout the season are like, they're dealing with all these, things that are happening. And I think that's again, like to the point that people value recovery so much that they're using performance enhancers, not necessarily to like up their max, their capacity, but literally trying to get back to their capacity as much as they can and just recover, and how big of a thing that is for sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think it goes twofold too, because, you see guys do too much. You see guys do not enough.
Not enough.
And we talk about, you were just talking about capacity, right? And it's like, I do value strength a lot. I think that's easy though. Like my personal opinion, like anybody can crush somebody in a workout. Like I could take somebody that doesn't know anything about lifting and they could put together a program and crush you and make you feel like you got a good workout.
For sure.
Right.
And then get on this line and let's run sprints here for a minute. Like
it's not hard to make somebody
here. Let's jump.
Bro.
Let's do all these other things. Yeah, you can do a lot of calisthenic stuff. That's just like
and it's like I feel like that's one of the things that's happening in baseball right now too. Is they're bringing in all these tools and devices and things like that to help with recovery, right? To like, and not only to help, but like to quantify, like to be able to objectively measure exactly where a player's at and point him or direct him in a better direction.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is also a mix of, I know that you brought it up. You walked into a spider web there. Okay. So there's also,
I might defer some questions.
Yeah. There's also a ton of tests. For example, yes, like, or assessments, evaluations, right? Like, and what I mean by that was like tests within the assessment or something like that, right? I know there's some of these ones where it's like, again, like what's the machines called where you like press against it and it measures like how hard like you can like, press against, you know what I'm talking about?
Kind of like a portable force plate thing.
Yeah, but there's like
a dynamometer.
Yeah, like a dynamometer, right? Like again, along with that, right? Some of these are like isometric, like strength tests are like closer to in ranges, like all these other things too. But I've seen that happen as well, where like someone goes and does a test, right? In their assessment or things like that, right? And they're using these tests to like, oh, is this guy, should we let him get back on the field? Like, is he strong enough? All these other things. And again, obviously all with the intent of trying to quantify, right? Like, and have some protocol put in place to like try to protect the player as much as possible. It's just, we have a responsibility is like, does the test actually quantify, or is it actually the best way to quantify? Is this guy healthy enough, or, those things that go out into it? And I've also seen things like that, for example, where guys like, external rotation of his shoulder on a table, with a guy like also some of those like portable dynamometers, right? Isn't that it?
For like measuring, it would be goniometer.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It's like, have you seen the ones where like they like press it? Like there's literally somebody there pressing against it. Have you seen somebody measure like that before?
I feel like I have, but I have to see exactly what you're talking about.
There's these new ones out, right, where they're doing it where it's like, which I think is, again, the
There's
variability.
measuring your force at specific joint angles.
Yeah, specific joint angle. But the only thing too, I also think it's like really interesting. It's like it also has to. You're also then taking in the person that's administering the test because he's literally pressing against you. So it's like I've seen them do it where like a guy's on a table, right, and he's like from ER going into like internal rotation, and it's like the guy's sitting there pressing. It's like, okay, well, depending on how much force you're putting on me and then what I'm able to create, like as well, and also at those other ranges, like you're adding in another variable of like an external like force or things with it. And again, I say all this in the sense of we're always trying to get more objective measurements or find ways. When like again, we're doing it with good intent. But what I've seen this happen before is like we had a guy that left from our facility back at 108 when I was working there, and he went to an organization, and he got there, and they're like, oh, like we're not going to let him throw because he didn't perform well at closer to this end range X, Y, and Z. And then a week and a half later, they tested him again, and then he passes, and I'm like, okay, well, let's take that in. It wasn't 4 or 6 weeks, no little extra. Like they're literally, again, he might have slept better last night, or more than likely, he knows the test now. His brain knows the test and goes, oh, okay. Like if you would have tested me 20 minutes from now, I'll also be better. Like, because I've never done that type of assessment before. And the brain's trying to figure out, okay, what's required of me like right now. And then like, you do it again. It's like I'd say how stable you are. And also you get activation, all the other things that you do as well. But it's like, if I do a test on you and you have no idea what I was actually testing for, and then I test you again, like the second time you're going to be better.
Right.
If I'm measuring your swing and then the next test, I go do it again 20 minutes from now and go, hey, I'm measuring you for bat speed. Like the guy's bat speed's going to jump. Like it just, cause like now what the intent of the, assessment is. And it's not so, it's like when you do what's it called? When you do like a evaluation, but you don't let them know that you're like what you're measuring for. Like there's not
it's like a candid eval.
Yeah, kind of like that, right? It's like
because you want to see how the person naturally moves without knowing what you're asking them to do.
Yeah, well, and even any science project, like any science evaluation, right? Like you don't want them to know what's the point of this. And they'll try to trick people too. Right. Like, hey, when this does this, I want you to, blink as fast as you can. So they think it's about blinking. They literally will give them a placebo type, focus, like for them to focus on something else.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, they're going to scare them halfway through the thing and like shock them on their butt or something. I don't know. Right. And when they answer a question wrong or something like that, or whatever it is. Right. And it's like, they want to see how they respond to somebody and what the response time is or something like that. Right. Where they're distracting them with a placebo, like to get so they don't know what they're actually looking at,
yeah.
And I did that I remember this one experiment, speaking about that, was where they had this one where it's like, hey, when this thing turns green, you're going to hit a button. I just need you to hit this button, right? Well, there was a guy inside the other side of the wall, right? And every time it would turn green, they would hit the button and it was electrocuting him, right? Or what they thought was electrocuting him. And then they kept doing it. And it was like more force, more electricity.
Yeah.
The guy was acting, but what they were actually measuring was the psychological, like how far would they go because someone with authority told them. And there was somebody standing behind that person and was like, hit the button. Like, like just like having that effect and like how they would respond to it when they think it's like, they don't know what's actually being tested right now. Right. But I was just thinking about that. Like, again, when you know what's being tested, you're going to drive that metric or you're going to do those other things. And I think that's why like that return to play, like protocols and those things are all like messed up too. Cause one, they're man-made, right? We're just like trying to figure out like, with it and we're like all guessing and like creating some type of protocol where there's a systematic approach of like how to do those things. If like somebody's ready or recovered or not. But I think it's also so interesting because it is crazy from like person to person. Is like, again, like we talked about like that recipe for somebody that might not be that important.
Right.
For somebody else, that might be a major part of their game. Like for somebody, like for example, when I broke my hand, if you knew me as a player and you're as a coach, right? You got to know that it's either 100% or no percent. Like there's no in between. I'm not playing at 40. So if you're going to let me go play, I better be back, ready to go. As soon as the doctor said I could play, I'm like, literally 2 days later, I'm like playing in an inter squad. Guy picks back because I was literally trying to steal a bag, dove back to the bag, hit the bag. My hand immediately swells up, and it's like, okay, yeah, because there's no 40%. I'm going to play with my hair on fire, like constantly, right? So it's like, I think that's also an interesting thing for, like obviously as different players, right? It's like, let's say you're David Ortiz. It's like, okay, he's probably not diving into a bag and he's probably going to be a DH right now and try to hit a homer. And like, that's all he's like, he's got a whole different return. Like the protocol for him could be way different because he's not pushing everything to like its max. He's not going to play with his hair on fire like that or whatever, things like that too. So I think that's also, we're always trying to come up with these objective, I know we went on a whole nother rabbit hole, but like, again, these objective things, to like do these protocols because it is really important, right? I mean, these are another thing that you're dealing with at that pro level too, is like, this is a multi-million-dollar asset, right? That the company has, and they're trying to protect them at all costs too. It's like, you don't want to send Mike Trout back out there. Like, even if he's got like, he mentions anything about his back or something like that, they're like, yep, shut him down, pull him out the game. Like, it's just like, because again, like that's a, $400 million asset for them. Like, like they're trying to protect it. So I think that's also another thing at that level is like, yeah, like, this isn't a 14-year-old kid that, you're just like, he'll be all right. Shut him back out there. Like like I saw that with the Altuve a lot this year was like, dude, he had anything, hit a foul ball off his leg. They're like, pull him out the game.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, it's not worth it. Oh, hamstring's a little tight, pull him out the game. Like any of those.
It's a marathon of a season, man. I like
long.
After spending 3 years in rehab too, as a rehab strength coach as well. Players aren't just assets, and that's to say, like, I've seen the emotional side of, when they do go down, and
sure.
I've been a part of it as a player, like at a lower level.
Yep.
And so have you, it sounds like. So, I feel like, there's a lot that you have to address. There's a lot that needs to be taken in. And, the emotional side of like when you're down and like, these players, they love the game, man.
Yeah,
they love to compete.
Yeah.
And, that's something, that's, for me anyway, I could say that was one of the driving things in my programs was like, I wanted to be able to provide the players with the best things that were out there. And, at the end of the day, like that was almost what drove my program was what was going to be best for this individual, not as a group. So even if you are collecting force plate data, you're getting a large snapshot, right?
Yeah.
But you're also able to create like individual signatures on athletes. And so I think that there's a lot of applicable information there, not to say that that's what's going to drive your program, but it gives you a little bit more of like, hey, what's underneath the hood of this car? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Do you feel like, when I feel like that's also too, like developing some of that feel and like, some of those things for like athletes, like that's something with experience that I've gained over time of like learning about humans more as well. Do you feel like you were worse at that too when you were like younger, of just like taking in all of that variability and like understanding like that with players?
Yes and no. I feel like I've always been like emotionally attached to like a player. Like I don't feel like, and personally, like looking back on it, I didn't realize it, but like, I literally have just tried to chase how to build the best baseball player. And it's awesome. My industry is so cool because you can look at all 30 teams and all 30 teams are running different programs. They value different things.
Yep.
You can see the buy-in with certain players when they get traded, and where you have to either backtrack or educate, you know what I mean, on certain things. Because like you said, what's good for one player might not be good for another player, and it's where does your program lie at to figure that out? And that I feel like is a very intricate and intimate thing with the player.
What do you mean at the highest level of the game that everybody just doesn't agree and everybody doesn't all just teach all the same things?
Hey man, you know what it's like, dude. So, and it's that, and that's where ego will hold you back, and I'm not saying I've been around great coaches, I've been around good environments and I've been blessed with those. But at the same time, we all have to respect that we all have our own philosophy based off our own experiences, based off our own successes, our own failures, and we're all biased towards that. Yeah. And once you can just accept that, you can now accept somebody else's philosophy, somebody else's experience, and you're valuing their information and their insights, their mistakes that they've made, so you don't have to make those same mistakes. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need to. I was the kid that my mom told me not to touch the pan because it's hot, so I touched it anyway. I was that kid, but like when you're dealing with not assets, when you're dealing with players, like you don't want to touch the hot pan, right? Like, and that's pro ball. Like, you know what? Like, that means business, man. And like, I think for me too, like another side is like their families. You think this is their livelihood, right?
Yeah.
So one thing that we didn't even talk about yet is like the stress level that they carry, not just inside the game, but outside the game.
For sure.
Those factors play a major role in recovery. You know, circling all the way back around, like all of that plays into how a player is able to go out and perform at their highest level the following day.
And then you know, you also take in, like, for example, is like you have a guy, you know, let's say everybody's also in different areas. Like, let's say you're a MLB, you know, MLB vet that's proven yourself, all those other things too. Like, your return to play rather than a guy that's like on the bubble, 40-man guy that, you know, he's, you know, free agent after this year, like all these other things. It's like, yo, that guy's like, dude, I might never play baseball again.
Yeah.
And also, I have no other skill sets because this is what I did. I got drafted out of high school. Like, you know, again, like,
Bro, they're going to be a strength coach in pro ball, I'll tell you that.
we just had a guy like that too. The same thing. Got drafted straight out of high school, right? Like, never went to college, 10-year minor leaguer, never really, like, it's like, yo, like, those are a lot of things. And like, as I'm coaching, like, I'm having those conversations, like when we're talking about how they're playing and how they're performing, a lot of times too, especially with men, egos, all those things, like they don't want to talk about that stuff. And I'm like, bro, like, how could you not be thinking about that right now? Meaning, like, I know you are. Like, I know that you're worried about these other things, which is also interrupting because now also too, your spot starting and you're not getting as many, you know, like, and you're coming off the bench and all these things. And like, writings on the wall, there's a young AA guy that's coming up that's a top performer at your position and like all these other things. And it's like, yo, like, psychologically, like, these are things that these guys deal with. And also too, they gave their whole life for this. Like, their whole career is coming down to this. That's why at the pro level, it's like, again, everybody wants to work with the pro guys because it's like these other things, but it's like, yo, there's a whole nother ball game involved. And also too, a lot of people want to work with the pro guys for them, not like for themselves, their own ego, not the player, and helping the other player that's there. It's like, they're not coming to you where it's like, you got to know how to manage and take in all of those variables and those things that you're talking about of being like, yo, like, this guy is playing 162 games. And also too, like, who is he? Like, what is their mindset? Like, how do they play? What is their intentions? Where are they in their careers? They have a contract year next year, or are they in the middle of a contract and they got 5 more years here? And so, like, also too, is he like how does that guy, you know, handle anxiety? Like, or again, like, how does he handle having bad games? How does he handle, you know, again, is he a guy that, you know, is going to, I've had players that when they're playing, it's like, I have to reach out to them. And then I have other guys that are like, literally every single day, good, bad, whatever, they're reaching out every single day and being like, hey man, this blah, blah, blah. Just want to keep you in the loop, whatever. And everybody, it's so interesting how different my relationships are with every single player and like what their process is and like how much feedback they want, what type of feedback that they want. You know, sometimes they're looking for feedback, but they really just need like a pat on the butt and like, you know, hey, just keep doing it. Like, you know, and then sometimes like, you know, they're not looking for no feedback and I need to give them feedback. You know, I'm like, yo, you keep doing that. Like, you know, I know you think that, you know, because some guys have built up such a resilience where they're thinking like, oh, like, dude's 0 for 20 and he's like, I'm good, blah, blah. I'm like, no, you're moving like crap. like we got to make some changes or this is going to turn into an 0 for 50. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you're not moving very well at all. It's getting worse, you know, like these things are actually getting worse. And it's like, but that's the thing though. It's like, it's so interesting, especially like, obviously different dynamics too, like pitcher, hitter, what positions they play, like all of those different things as well. You're taking in all these variables and, you know, figuring out like that's what I mean. Like that is like, there's no book on that. Like, and like, to your point,
teams are hiring sports psychologists, man. Like,
yeah.
You need somebody to help direct and guide you, right?
For sure.
And like, there's a department for every like guidance that is needed
for sure
with each sports team.
Yeah. Which can be difficult too, though, because I've had these interactions too. That could be, it can be difficult too, because sometimes, again, with good intention, you could have a lot of chefs in the kitchen. Yeah. Right. And like, now you got the guy thinking about well, the strength coach told him this, and the like the
Mhm.
psychologist coach said him this, and he's trying to go through his routine that the sports psychologist gave him, but also his hitting coach gave him, but also the strength guy gave him this for activation, and then also too, he's got his hometown hitting coach that is also saying this too, and then you got all, and then you got the manager who's like, calling this in the game, and you're like, dude, like you're having me take, like you guys are calling first pitch take, or you want me to do this against this guy, but like, or the analytics team is also giving feedback to the manager, and the manager's like trying to run the team or putting you this part in the lineup because of that. But then there's like all of these things as well, and like getting everybody pulling towards the same direction, like in any organization.
That's the goal.
It's difficult, and also too, the other teams are battling the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So it's not gonna be, and then also too, every year coaches are getting hired for different teams, so they're flip-flopping teams, and you have rovering, like most of the hitters that come to me are like, dude, I've had a different hitting coach for the last 6 years straight.
Mm-hmm.
I've never had the same guy. So then, and every time I get a different guy or I move up through levels, they're all talking about different things. And then also too, like they don't have that Rolodex of all the things that they haven't worked for me and why and what that other coach, because also too, great, you're going by the player, but you know how many things I don't tell the player about, how like things that are going on in their body that they have no idea about.
Yeah.
So then all of a sudden they go to another coach, and it's like the player only knows what I told him. He doesn't know all the other things that I don't do with him, or how I handle him, or all those other things. And that's why I think it's also interesting. Like we'll have one of our players, pro guys, will go to a different team, and like nowadays, like, well, usually our good organizations or really good hitting coaches, a lot of them will reach out to me if they know that I've worked with the guy and be like, hey, like, what have you learned about coaching this guy?
Yeah.
And a lot of it is not like, great, yeah, we'll talk through X's and O's and like movement and all those things, and like, hey, he does really well at this. He does really bad when he starts like doing this bigger leg kick, or he tends to want to go to X, Y, and Z, or compensate in these ways, and these are things. Great, but a lot of it is, like you said, is like how I'm managing, like maybe how I give them feedback or how I package it to them when I give them those things too. When you looked at that as well, like within all of that, and then also, I think it's the interesting piece is when you made that transition too, where you were going to go outside of baseball, right? Yeah. Why don't you intro that for us?
Yeah. So COVID obviously happened. And I think at that moment I was going through some hardships in my life, and I just valued what was in front of me. And, what was in front of me was who I really was too, like the people in my life at that time. And I just wanted to focus more on that. So I kind of jumped out of pro ball. It was obviously super hard for me. Didn't make it to the big league level. I think I was going into my 4th year in AAA, which, PCL travel back then was tough. Nowadays they have every Monday off.
Yeah.
Back then you were in a new city every 3 or 4 days. And
and they also have
you're flying Southwest,
6 days.
and the first flight out in the morning, man. So it was just, it was a lot, man. It was a lot mentally to handle. It was a lot emotionally handled. And I feel like I had taken a step back, like morally at that point in my life, that, it was the best move for me to get out of baseball. So, that's what I had done. It wasn't that, I was a little bit burnt out on being a strength coach in pro ball. Like I missed baseball as a player, man. It was, there was a piece of that never got filled, and like even working in pro ball, like still didn't feel that void in my heart. That I hadn't dealt with yet either. But, long story short, got out of pro ball, and moved to Las Vegas, and,
blue collar, baby.
Yeah. And one of my buddies at the moment, he was selling solar panels, making decent money, dude. And like, I was almost in this like career transition. Like,
for sure.
I'm going to go do whatever I want to do. Like,
I
was telling one of these guys over here the other day, like, I almost got my skydiving license. Like, and I was going to go, seriously, bro, I fell in love with skydiving. Like, I was like,
dope.
This is the most,
I still want to go. I haven't gone.
Like, dude, it helped
one
me live, bro. And I was like, this is what I want to do. I'm going to be a skydiving instructor.
Yeah.
And I was like, you show up to work and you jump out of an airplane 6 times out of the day and then you go home, bro. That was the job. And I was like, this is going to be a great life. But that didn't happen. I ended up going to sell solar panels. And, that was where I grew up, because I wasn't selling the solar panels. I was knocking on people's doors, making a pitch. I had never sold anything in my life. Nothing.
Yeah.
And, that was public speaking, being in front of like large groups of people, you know, those were all things that we're all scared of, right? And
Yeah.
it's like, you know how hard it is to go present in front of a bunch of people. Like, you're so vulnerable,
Yeah.
man. Like, you're
Yeah.
putting your thoughts and your work out there,
Mm.
and you want the feedback, but you don't want the feedback at the same time. It's like, when somebody walks up to my door and knocks on my door, I'm not answering it. I don't want to talk to you.
Yeah.
Like, it's nothing personal, because I obviously don't know you. I just
Yeah.
don't want to talk to a salesman at my door.
Yeah.
So, like, I already had that in my heart. I'm like, what am I doing out here, man?
Yeah,
I can
yeah.
remember sitting on a curb, banging my head on it, bro. And I'm like, what am I doing? This is
Yeah.
so dumb.
Yeah.
You know, but I continued to push. I had people that were depending on me,
Mhm.
and I continued to go out there and knock doors and get denied, and people like shoo me off their porch and show me a shotgun behind the door, like all this stupid dude.
Yeah.
It's crazy when
Yeah.
you go
Yeah.
knock on
You're knocking
random
on people's
doors, man.
doors for sure.
It,
Yeah,
it is not like I have so much respect for the people in the sales world now.
Yeah.
But
knocking talks are rough.
holy smokes, man. Like that is like, nobody wants to be rejected. And as soon as you knock that door, you're already rejected.
for sure.
Like, you have to
in a
keep-
negative already.
Yes,
Yeah.
man. And so, like, I learned to be more personal. Like I said, I put my head down and I worked. And this was an environment where, like, I had to be this bubbly personality, which is not me. Like,
Yeah.
I'm a lay low, like, tell you how it is, be real blunt with you, and we're gonna get to work. And when you're knocking on somebody else's door, man, you're trying to sell something for yourself. For one, you have to believe in the product that you're selling.
Yep.
And two, you have to get over your own insecurities, because
For sure.
you know, you're out there for your family, right? Like,
Yeah.
not just yourself. Like, you're not doing it because it's fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there's just a lot of emotional and mental things that you have to get over doing that. But, you know, I did okay. But I think the biggest thing that I took out of that experience was being able to talk to people, being able to, you know, relate to them. I was good at building rapport with players, but, like, just in a general pop, like, I hadn't been in that environment, bro. I haven't talked to normal people. Like, when my off season came around, I was in the house with my family. Like, I was going on trips with my family, right? Like, I was with my people. So I think just that environment, like, helped me grow as an individual, to be able to open myself up, be vulnerable with people, and accept that failure is just, you know, to me, it's not really failure. You know, the lessons that I learned from my failures. So it was never really a failure, because I continued to learn and learn and learn. And that's still how I view things. Like, I've failed at so many things in my life, but continue to pick myself up. I've continued to make better decisions. And I've continued to follow my heart, you know, and I do trust my morals and my values that are bringing me, you know, more in line with what I am doing on a daily basis now. So, you know, I learned a lot about myself at that time in my life, and it was probably the perfect time to do it. But, you know, shortly into that job, thankfully I didn't have to do it too long. I got a random call from the Oakland A's, and they had offered me, you know, a spot to interview. I didn't even have, like, I was so far out of baseball mentally, I didn't even have a resume, like, that I hadn't updated in 8 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I got that thing in, I think the next day. I got hired the following day. And it was like, to me, I had been out of strength and conditioning for, you know, 6-7 months at this time, that it was like I didn't have the language, you know, to be able to, like, talk through an interview. And I was like, I had a good interview based off my personality, right? And you know, we'll get down it, I'm sure, down the road a little bit, but you know, it was a blessing in disguise, and I ended up taking that position and got to work with a lot of great people over there. Got to learn a lot of new things, and at that time, like, that position was for a major league assistant position and a rehab strength coach. So, you know, there were things that I was going into that I was excited about, you know, as a discoverer and being able to try things out. But again, like, you're still in pro ball, so you're limited to what you can try with certain athletes. And I think, you know, at the end of the day, like, the performance, you know, the result is what matters. Whereas, you know, in these settings, it's the process, right? And after being in pro ball, I feel like there is a lot more people that could benefit from learning a quality process on how to go about your business. And if you do want to carry yourself, and you want to carry yourself to the next level and to the next level, there is a process to that, man.
For sure.
And like you alluded to earlier in the conversation, you know, there's players that they've only experienced success, and failure hasn't come their way. And it's like, you know, I don't know if it's entitlement, I don't know if that's the right word, but I've seen players get to those points in their careers.
Naivety. Maybe.
Yeah, and it's like, it's not their fault. Like, nobody,
So
they weren't forced into a
deck of cards
position
that
that
are
they
handed.
had to fight through adversity, right? Like, they've always like won. They've always been the champion. And it's like when you get to a certain level in baseball, like there's gonna be a lot of players that are better than you.
Yeah.
And you're gonna need another side
Some
of
of
your
us,
game.
some of us that was little league. You know
Yeah,
what I'm saying?
yeah. You're gonna need a lot more
Yeah.
than just talent, you know, to get
For
you
sure.
through seasons. And you know, that's where I've learned the most is being blessed to be around some of these, you know, players that are on their way out of the game that have spent 15 plus years in pro ball.
Mm,
And it's like those were the conversations I look back and value because it's like I got
sure.
a plethora of, you know, knowledge and experience from these guys that have been in the game for a long time. And then, like that was another thing for me is like I was most of the time, even like going into the big leagues, I was younger than the players.
Mhm.
And it was like I couldn't have this massive ego in
Yeah,
that
yeah.
environment. Like they knew more about themselves. They knew more about the game than I did.
For sure.
And so it was just a learning opportunity constantly.
Mhm.
And I think that, you know, that far too often, like you had said in that conversation, in our previous conversation as well, is there's so many different rabbit holes that you can go down. There's so many different coaches that you can listen to. You know, that was always part of my speech was like, I know you guys have had 100 different strength coaches in your career, and I'm just another one of them. But, you know, when we do work together, like I'm going to help educate you on the things that you have questions about. And if I don't know the answer, I'm going to go, I got books where I can go find that answer.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of information out there and we'll find it together. Right. And it's like,
Mhm.
we're all just trying to learn, man. And
Yeah.
I feel like in that process, you know, there's just a level of acceptance that you have to have with yourself
Mm.
to be able to not have the answer and to be able to listen to other people. And I think that that's where the growth and the collaboration exists is within those conversations.
Yeah, I think that's good. And then, you know, kind of like with that, what would you say? What would you say? Kind of, obviously, with all that time, you had left pro baseball before, obviously getting back into it again. And then, what was kind of your mindset or like thirst for wanting to get back into a private space, right? Like, and especially, I mean, I know, you know, more uniquely, not just private. It wasn't like you were just looking at private spaces. You know, when we have you know talked and developed a relationship from that way. But what kind of like pushed you in that same way, or being like, because I know we've talked a lot about that. Like you were really excited, you know, of the things you were going to get to do. So I kind of wanted you to share that and kind of open that up of like where your heart was at and how you felt there.
Yeah. You know, one of the biggest driving things was my family. I have 3 boys at home. So, you know, they're broad age range, 14, 10, 18 months. And they love sports. So,
Yeah.
you know, part was wanting to be back in their lives. You
For
missed
sure.
out. And that's what a lot of people don't see, you know,
Yeah.
is what the big league guys
Crazy
go
amount of
through,
time.
man. Like even
Yeah.
the minor league guys is like the commitment that you have.
Even worse with the minor league guys. Major league guys, some of them can like fly their family in and
Yeah.
do some of those things. Like,
Yeah, it's dude,
Yeah.
it's a real like it takes a toll on you over time, and
For
if
sure.
you let it, it'll wash you down a drain, man.
yeah.
But you know, that was a big thing for me is just getting to a point in my life to where I was missing out on things that I wanted to be a part of, and not making sure that you know I'm not choosing myself over my people, right? And it's like I was in a space that allowed me you know some freedom, but also too like there's a lot of like requirements and stress you know that comes
Yeah.
along with the job.
Yep.
But going back to, I think my family was one of the things that I wanted to come back for, and be a part of their lives a little bit more. But like getting into the training side of things, like the way I'm feeling now about like getting back in the private sector is just it's pure excitement and joy to be able to create something here. That
And I got, and not to cut you off, but I got this sense from you too, as well, is that you had far less of a, I'm running from something rather than like running to something. Like that's what's like feeling that like excitement more
Yeah.
from you is more of like is like, hey, like, and it doesn't really matter. Like there's just different, again, it doesn't matter what, like when you're in different industries or different sections of industries or
Mhm.
different, you know, layouts is like, again, like there's the restrictions on all different ways. And it's just more about like, okay, like again, the same exact reason if that organization, 10 other organization, like I hear again, along with it, it's like there is things at every different level. There's, for example, there's things even at like here at our facilities, like
we couldn't do things that we can do now,
Yeah.
like 3 years ago
Yeah.
or whatever, right? Like that affordance, right, is constantly changing based on the environment or what's available to us, like what we're able to do, what we built, all those other things. But yeah, like I got that more like sense as me and you talked, we're just like, hey, like, again, like it's an opportunity to like to run towards something, and also too, I think tap into some areas for you where like applying your brain over to a explorative kind of mindset too. I think that's
Going
huge.
back to it, man, like you said, it's funny that you say that because I never really thought of it that way. But like running to something now might have like scared me, earlier on my career, because it's like you have to just create something from nothing.
Yeah.
To where
Like a scarcity mindset more too.
yeah, and it's like I have all the knowledge and information I need. It's putting it together, right, and applying it. And in a pro setting, it's a little different because you're working with multiple different departments.
Yep.
And like you said, like the vision needs to be the same. And making sure that you and the people that you're working with see movement the same way is important.
Yeah.
But here my excitement is more or less coming from, like I said, being able to develop the perfect baseball player. Like lifting's easy. It really is. Programming's easy. It really is. Programming for individual people, that's where we get a little bit more down the road. Like we got high school kids coming in that hyperextended, dislocated knees and dealing with UCL strain that are 12, 13. It's like, well, this is gone too far.
Yeah.
Right. Like now we need to do something. Now we as an industry need to be more proactive with, where that younger generation is, because that younger generation at one point is going to be the older generation.
For sure. And also too, youth sports has become pretty professional.
Yeah.
And how it's
man.
done and how they go about their business. And a lot of these guys like are training like a professional at a really young age, and like I know players that have like a development team around them, right? Where they have, a strength coach, they have a pitching coach, they have an infield coach, they have, every asset of the game, right? Like they're surrounded by these things. They have also too, like older players or players that play professionally, they just mentor them and like how to deal with, failures. That's more applicable than maybe like their psychologists. They're going over more of like, like traumas and other things and being able to like those things, but also too, like dealing with direct wisdom of like feedback from players of being like how they dealt with some of these transitions throughout their life. And we do that a lot for a lot of our players, is like direct from there. But the thing that also too, I was thinking about, is like you're saying as well, is like anybody can make a program, but it doesn't mean that the program is really good, right? We can just get a blanket program for everybody and just roll this thing out, right? But at the same time, right, you're going to get obviously there's a lot of things there where as well when you're looking into this space of being like, well, I do have in some sense more unlimited time, right? Or I do have time where I can spend more of my energy throughout my day, like really processing some things like, man, like, that might really work. Like, let me try that with this guy and see if that, does these other things. And also I think like you said, when you're in an environment where it's different of, Simon Sinek talks about this. He's a leadership like guy. If you
starting
ever,
with why.
Start with why is, he talks about that as well. It's like, obviously the sense of creating safety, to be explorative, and go into some of these environments and like, what would I do if I had, if I did have, a different set of circumstances, or also too, if my contract wasn't 1 year's or, the things and like having to deal with all of that, or, again, at any point, some new director could come in and then everybody, like they bring in their own people, or they, the organization reorganizes, they bring a new farm director in or whatever, right? Like there could be all these different things that change where like in a private setting is like, I might have that hitter for 5 years, where pro setting is like, like for example, if one guy we're training gets traded, I'm still training the guy. Like, it's just like he gets traded out of your organization. It's like, yo, I might not see that guy unless he comes to town or whatever, right? It's like, and it's
You don't know how many times that's happened to me.
Yeah,
man. Like,
100%. You're in the middle of a
I've spent
program.
12 months on a UCL,
Yeah.
and it's like as soon as that guy's healthy, he's with a different team. and
different
it's-
team. Yeah,
it's tough,
I can
man.
only imagine with the A's specifically, just because the organizational, things as well is like you guys have a lot of players that get traded out, right?
Yeah.
And they use them for assets, for money and all these
Yeah.
other things that they bring into the org too. So it's like I'm sure you had to deal with that too, far more than like certain organizations for sure.
Yeah, the A's are a good organization. They, there's been a lot of negative connotation out there with their organization. I think, if you look at the players that have came through that organization, the players that are getting
Stupid
put
good
out,
players, yeah.
they
You guys
develop-
have also developed a ton of players that are superstars.
yeah, they
onto
do.
their teams,
I
for
mean,
sure.
we just watched a couple of them in the World Series, right?
Yeah,
Like
for sure.
it's very impressive, to see how that coaching staff over there, how hard those guys work.
Yeah.
And
And your guys' scouting department too. I mean, like you have to
Yeah.
scout the guys and bring in the right dudes. Then you got to develop those guys. It's not like you guys are out there just like signing a whole bunch of guys that have been 10-year, like they're in the middle of their peak of their career and like bring them in. Like, a
It's
lot
a
of the
mix
guys
of
are,
development, like from the system. It's also a mix of like when those dudes finally do get their numbers and then they get traded for prospects, and then we get the prospects over.
Yep.
And there's a lot of good ball players that come through the Oakland A's
sure.
organization, and it's got a history, man. And
Yep.
like I said, the coaches over there, they give their heart and soul to that game, that organization,
Mhm.
and they don't take a day off, man. And
Yeah.
the development is something that I'm definitely drawn to, and
Yeah.
it's fun being a part of, and like learning from my superiors over there it was a great opportunity. And I think, seeing the younger kids come up to the big leagues that aren't the Aaron Judges, right? It's
Mhm.
like when you see that and you see the gaps,
Yeah.
what's
Like,
missing.
I was thinking about you as soon as you said that, I thought of Zach this year. Geloff isn't his last name?
Oh yeah, he's
Isn't it?
phenomenal.
Yeah, like when he was in AAA here, like I was posting him, I'm like, bro, this kid's gonna be good.
Yeah.
Like I still think like if a traditional like coach or somebody's like looking at him, he's kind of unorthodox. Like he does some moves that are kind of funky, I guess you would say, but like he does the big things like
Yeah.
really well. And when he was in AAA and he was sitting, I'm like, bro, that
Dude, he
guy's
does the little things well.
yeah,
too,
he
man.
does. Yeah, he's a really good player.
to follow, dude.
Yeah.
He does things the right way, and it's
Yeah.
like that's what you want to see with some of those guys coming up. And it's
Mhm.
if there was a way for me to be able to reach my hand into this environment and be able to help and do that, like
Yeah,
that'd be great. But it's like, or I could just put myself there, right?
Yeah.
And it's like
Yeah.
that's where my passion is, I think. And
Yeah.
like I said, being with
And-
my family
and you
being,
being relationship driven, I was gonna say that as well, is like because we can have these longer relationships with guys.
Right.
Like we hold on to guys, right? And it's like that's one thing that was hard for me too. It's like I'm very relationship driven, so it's like I don't like these transactional type environments that are set up, right?
Yeah.
As well, like it's difficult for me. And again, other guys crush in those environments,
Mhm.
right? And they're really good at being in those environments. I think I struggle with more of that where it's like I want to develop a relationship. Like that's the whole point. Is
Right.
My interaction is like,
yeah.
with
That's
it.
when you get
so
the most out of a player too. It's
For
not
sure.
when you're just pointing them in the direction. It's like,
Yeah.
how do you make this matter to that player too? And
Yeah.
it's like when you ask that question, you actually like build that rapport with the player. Then
Mhm.
they know how much you care. Then they care how much you know, right?
Yeah. No.
And
for
it's
sure.
it's the like you said, the relationship is the biggest piece of it
Yeah, it's
because
huge.
like I said, anybody can make a workout. Anybody can make you throw up. Like it's not
Yeah,
that
yeah.
hard, man. Like
Yeah.
let's cut it here. Like
Yeah.
there's so much cool new things out there, man, that
Mhm.
people are trying and it's working.
Yeah.
That nobody knows why.
Mm.
That we can start to go down some different rabbit holes and try different things with players, and also be able to see their growth, their development, and not only that, but their confidence.
Yeah.
And that is a game changer. Is like,
Huge.
dude, if you got talent, great. If you step in the box and you're shaking, that's a bad thing,
For sure.
right? But whenever
Yep.
you know and you see, like all of my rehab guys, I go back and I leave. I had sheets, like folders with them, and I would leave each week's workout in the back of it. So when they were done, I would hand them and be like, here's your work. Like, this is everything that you've done in the last 3 months, 6 months, whatever the rehab process was. It's like, you put this work in, now go play.
Mm.
And it's like bridging the gap
Yeah.
between, man, like bridging the gap between all those things, and knowing that like I didn't only work out, but I gave it everything that I had. Like
Mm.
that's what you want
Yeah.
for yourself, right? And it's
Yeah.
like not every coach is out there is willing to push that player
Yeah.
to that.
Yeah.
And in that setting, like sometimes you can't push that player to that set
For sure.
to that mindset, right?
Yeah.
And
And
it's
you
like,
might just be pushing them along, like you said,
Yeah.
right? You might be watering
you're-
a seed or planting a seed or whatever, right? And that somebody else might actually see the,
yeah,
you know, the
But
tree grow.
the
you know?
confidence, man, that you get from like working hard, your work ethic, and seeing the things that you can do, the things that you can accomplish, rather than the things you can't, is going to give you more and more confidence. And like you alluded to, of like having that player for 5 years, like, yeah, I could have you for 5 years. You could come in here once a week and I can bust your butt in a workout, but it's not going to work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like you have to be dedicated to what you want. And,
Yeah.
you know, if you want to be a pitcher, if you want to be a hitter, if you want to be the best in the weight room, and like you're doing all those things, like maybe just pick one of those things, maybe
Yeah.
pick two of those things. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
if you can't do all of the things that you need to do, like you need to start going through your life and getting rid of the things that you don't necessarily need, or the things that are distractions, so it frees up more time for you to be able
Yeah.
to do the things
Consistency is also interesting too, as well, because like, for example, like you're saying as well, is like figuring out what your mixture is, you know, that you need at this point in your life. Maybe at one point in your life, you really like, it is a bigger jump for you to like, you know, mix in a lot more weight room. Like, you know, those things as well, because you like literally need a base of strength. Like you're just ridiculously weak, right?
You got to have that capacity that we talked about.
Yeah,
man. Like,
for sure.
if
But
you
I
don't have that capacity, like you're at a big disadvantage by the time you even step on the field, bro.
For sure. And I think also with that, right? Like I think people need to be careful with that mixture, because I've also seen people where it's like they try to go all in on the strength side, and it's like, dude, you haven't hit like what a skill like coach like in over a month
Yeah.
or, you know, 3 months or 6 months or whatever. And it's like, well, I'm just really trying to get physical right now. And it's like, okay, well, there's a lot of guys that are physical that suck at baseball. Like, it's like, you got to understand that, like, you know, with that. And it's like, my little hot take is again, like, I know there are guys out there that's like, I've never had a coach say that like this guy's too physical. It's like, I say it all the time. Like like he got strong in the wrong ways,
Yeah.
right? Like he's strong at the, like, great. He could lift a house, but like he can't play short. Like it's like, it's awesome. Like, you know what I'm saying? But now he's a left fielder or on the bench and not even playing anymore, you know, but he's the strongest guy on the team.
Yep.
And you know, and also I've seen the opposite, as you've seen as well, right? I've seen guys that are not crazy. Like I probably wouldn't even notice them in a weight room. Like if you put them, like they just do average stuff, like, you know, stay average, like general foundational like strength, and like, dude, that guy's a monster on the baseball field, and he
Yeah.
is crazy good with those things, right? And it's like, and I just wanted to add this thing in there. Just shout out to Andy McKay. Do you know Andy McKay?
I don't.
So Andy McKay, I think now his official role with the Mariners, I think it might be like he's like either a special assistant to like the GM now, or like president or something. He's got some unique role that he came in, but at one point he was just there. He was their director of player development, and he told me when I was thinking about transitioning into pro ball at one point, he literally told me, because I was like asking him for advice, like what teams I should go to, who should, you know, what is his perspective from inside the game and his wisdom. And he literally told me, which is the opposite answer that I wanted to hear, he was like, Joey, like, I think you're in a prime position, like where you are right now with where your feet are, and that you're going to have far bigger impact on the game outside of professional baseball than you will inside of professional baseball. You know, in the sense he was referring to, without saying the words, like, you know, some of the gag order expectations, right, of being like, you know, again, like a lot of pro organizations, like they're competing, right? Like they're competing against other organizations, and they got, you know, organizational secrets and like how they develop, and they're trying to get an edge, and they're trying to do these other things. And, you know, again, along with it, like I'm a sharer, and I like external processor, and I like to, you know, post, and it just like, you know, in that environment. And also too, like you know, again, I like jumping from thing to thing, and just like what's hot, what's pushing me at this time is, you know, what am I passionate about right now? And I want to go really deep in this area right now, and the freedom to do that. And what great advice I felt like he gave me at that time. It's like, you know, even though it wasn't what I wanted to hear at the time, and I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I'm gonna get in pro ball. Like I've already, that's why I called you. And he's telling me like, maybe you should consider not, you know, going into pro ball. And, you know, again, that wasn't what I wanted to hear at the time, but it's like, again, with that, like obviously his wisdom playing out from that as well. And I think that you're going to be a huge, also the impact. I also think about that as huge, is like huge impact to the game in general. It's like, with you in the space too, it's like, man, I always talk about like there's this big gap between like experts and like a novice, right? Of like the volunteers or the highest level of the game, right? I want to do everything I can to like close that gap as much as possible because that gap, that knowledge gap,
Yeah.
right, is massive for player development, right? And I used to think about that when I made our original foundations course, right, for hitting, was like, man, there's like 4 or 5 things that if I just, every amateur coach, little league across the world, every dad across the world, if they just knew these 5 things that we all got taught when we were young, that's like not accurate and like actually hurts their kids' performance and like just don't teach them out of these things that they're already doing well that we were just wrong about, right? Like we were just wrong. Like, again, I can't tell you how many people across the nation right now still believe like squishing the bug or something like that, right? And it's like, all right, like, because we were all taught it, right? Like, oh, turn the back foot. We got to do this. We got to do these things. And it's like, man, like, if everybody just stopped teaching squish the bug, how would that impact baseball? How much better would some of these patterns be if they just like didn't teach this thing that they were taught, right? And like how big, that would be as well. Yeah, so I know I'm just excited for all the resources and the things that you're going to pour into like this community as well and like help close that gap of knowledge, like, from the top of the game too. We have, especially with social media and all the things that we have available to us now and the platforms and the things that I feel like the farm has also helped increase. And also where the industry, like everybody just stacking bricks on top of one another and like building paveways so that we could, run down as well and standing on the shoulders of everybody that's also came before us. So I'm excited to get and the information and the expertise that you also have in your head and the experiences you have and share that with the community too. I think it's just gonna be major for the game of baseball just because also too, like the opportunity that we have is standing on the shoulders of the people that came before us of like, one, how we can even get it out that there's a plethora of like people are used to going on social media now and utilizing these resources to better themselves as coaches. And
think about how many environments that you have a strength coach in the batting cage with you, right?
Yeah,
like you asked me earlier, like what I'm most excited about. Like, dude, just flipping right now is great.
Yeah.
But like having the conversations with the other hitting coaches here, Nicole and Cody are great.
Yeah.
And like being able to take their language and their information and put it into my own toolbox, right? Like I do know movement. I know movement well. I know the swing pretty well. I know the shapes that I'm looking for, right? And I like the moves that I'm looking for, but I also feel like there's so much value in like you said, closing that gap. Like there's that gap in the between the strength coaches, the trainers, and the hitting coaches, and it's like
For sure.
there's so much low hanging fruit that we could just grab, but there's also so much information out there that one of the things that I've over the past week got to experience is just that inner working relationship of like the most common word I've heard here is feel. What do you feel? How does this feel? What's the feel you're looking for, right? And it's like the integration between the weight room and the cage, like they're interconnected. And a lot of the corrective exercises, they're not even corrective, just the movement and activation exercises that are being applied are giving that player that feel so they can then take it into the cage and transfer that, right? Because you have the weight room, you have the cage, you have the field.
Yeah.
But where does that all connect at, right? And it's like, you got to stay in your lane. Well, why? Like, why do we have to stay in our lane if we're all chasing the same thing? Like, and that's one of the things, like you said, having the freedom here to do that. Like, that's one of the things I'm most drawn to is being able to learn the swing from you guys being able to learn movement and us vice versa, right? Like, we all know the swing. We all know movement here. Like, we all have a similar language. There's not an ego in this environment. Like, now we can just get to work.
For sure.
And that's awesome, man.
Yeah. Love it.
You created that here.
I don't know about it. Everybody has stacked in for sure. So I think that's going to be, just big there as well. Just having you on board, excited for all those things, wanted to introduce you to. Again, I've had you as a resource for years, not just, now that you're here every day is awesome. But again, we've talked and collabed, many times like over the years too, especially we have a bunch of players that play in the A's organization and we'd be talking back and forth like, yo, hey, this guy's going here. And these are big things that I gave, during his eval and where we have him focused and why. And so, it's just, been awesome, there as well. So I'm excited to do that with all of our players now, and also where it will go. So, let me pray us out and we'll go from there. Cool.
Appreciate it.
Dear Father, thank you so much just for your love, God, and just that you brought us here, and then also to just bringing Candy into our family, God, and just we're going to just the resources that you continue to provide your people, God. And we're just so grateful for the time that you've put into us, and also the patience and grace that you have with us too as well, God. We just ask that you just guide our journey, that you guide our relationships, that you utilize us to for your will. And we just pray for all these things in Jesus' mighty name. Amen. Amen.
Amen.
Until next time, Farm System out. See, bro?